Crocs, ancient survivors of the disaster that wiped out the dinosaurs. A design so perfect, it has hardly changed in 250 million years. Sophisticated predators that can outwit humans.
Yeah, it's quite frightening, you know, because all you see is this great yellow mouth with all these teeth.
Crocs attack with military precision, without warning, without mercy.
The speed and surprise with which you launch your attack can disarm an enemy without even the enemy being able to fight.
Armor-plated, armed, and dangerous. Crocs are the ultimate killing machines. But what is the secret of their deadly success? Stealth hunters from the water, crocs have invaded the swamps and rivers of every warm landmass on Earth. Today, there are more than 20 different types of crocodile, all specialized killers. They are the dominant predators wherever they live. Throughout their range, croc habitats overlap with man. Living so close to the enemy results in about 3,000 attacks on people every year. Survivors' stories give a chilling insight into how it feels to be the victim of a croc attack. Some of the best tales come from Australia, home of the biggest reptile on the planet, the saltwater crocodile, more feared than any other man-eater.
We have a lot of sharks in Australia too, but you can swim in areas where there's sharks without a problem, really. Crocodiles is different. If you wanted to commit suicide, you would just go down to the Adelaide River, right on the edge of Darwin, and go swimming. And there's a 100% chance you're not going to make it. We don't lose many people up here because most people up here are in fact very well educated about crocs and they don't take the risks. But there's no doubt that in some of those rivers you would just never make it if you tried to swim in them. You'd never make it.
That's a lesson some people learn the hard way. In Australia, a croc attack is always headline news. In 1997, Brad Malloy found himself on the front page. Brad and his mate Brian were camping at a favorite fishing spot in the Northern Territory. At the end of the day, they sat by the river to cool off with Chevy, the dog. What they didn't know was that they were under surveillance. Crocs can spend up to 2 hours underwater without taking a breath, just waiting for the perfect moment to strike.
It's hard to tell how long you've been watching us. We'd only been there 3 hours. I was just sitting with my legs out in front of me. My friend was in the water, just squatting down in the water up to his chest. Crocodile would have known he was there.
Brad finished his beer and went to get another, leaving Brian sitting in the water on his own. When Brad returned, all hell broke loose. The croc lunged from the water and grabbed Brad by the leg. It pulled him under and began to roll.
Of course, it happened so quick. In the time that I was grabbed and pulled in and rolled and let go, it was, you really didn't even know. You knew it was going on, but you don't have any chance to do anything. The power is just amazing and lightning speed, so, you've got no chance.
Brad was incredibly lucky. the croc didn't have a good enough grip to drown him.
Pretty well the last scar comes up to about there, so that's his whole mouth down there, the whole foot was in his mouth. Puncture marks, things like that, pretty bad scars. The Achilles have just been completely severed. Basically every puncture mark and things like that goes to the bone, so it's very lucky.
I've often asked people that have been badly grabbed if they had a handgun, could they have done something? The answer's always been yes. But if you haven't got something like a handgun, there's not a lot you can do. What are you going to do? You know, they're not Bambi, you know, you can't sit down and have a conversation with them. You know, they're a predator, and when they go, they're going to get whatever they're going for, and their object is to thrash it and kill it and as quick as they can.
The attack on Brad might seem like a crude display of brute force, but it was executed with military precision. On an otherwise deserted stretch of river, the croc detected Brad, Brian and Chevy's presence. It tracked them down and then waited. It didn't strike on sight, but spent time evaluating the situation and selecting its target. And when the Salty did finally launch its attack, it was only inches away, but they hadn't noticed a thing. Croc attacks on animals are carried out with equal precision, but the target rarely lives to fight another day. East Africa is home to some fearsome predators, making a living off huge herds of grazing prey. In the rivers of Kenya's Masai Mara, the Nile croc is king. Migrating wildebeest on a forced march to find pastures new are soft targets. A Nile croc is such a sophisticated hunter that it can drift nose to nose with its victim without a single ripple. A Nile croc attack is violent and devastating, a heart-stopping burst of power and speed. But what are the skills, strategies and hardware that give these armored animals victory in attack after attack? How do they learn to kill? The ranks of crocodilian forces swell each year during the breeding season. This female saltwater croc has laid a clutch of about 50 eggs in a warm nest of rotting vegetation. She patrols day and night to protect it. Meanwhile, the temperature in the nest is shaping her new recruits. Cooler temperatures produce females. More heat produces males. It's a delicate balance. If the temperature gets too high, things can go seriously wrong. The hatchlings are baked into grotesque shapes. Two months after laying, the baby crocs start calling to their mum from inside the eggs. She breaks open the nest and the eggs start to hatch. Once the new recruits have emerged, she delicately picks them up in her powerful jaws and transports them to the water. Here, the squad keeps together to stay safe. Going it alone is not an option.
Need you up here, sir! Push it out!
You need to weed out all the younger, the less able, the weaker specimens in your army. And we do this by training recruits, by training younger soldiers, and weeding them out through the process of training.
And the training is brutal. Undefended nests are sitting targets. The assault course begins straight away as the hatchlings emerge directly into hostile territory. A hungry monitor lizard in search and destroy mode can wipe out a whole nest in a single attack. To survive, the hatchlings must find cover. This recruit is learning fast. But even in the safety of the water, there is still the threat of aerial attack. Kites and eagles flying overhead easily spot hatchlings on the surface. Another valuable training exercise. But diving to evade one enemy just puts you in the path of another. To a massive fish like a barramundi, a baby croc is a snack. Another recruit fails basic training. Even if they survive this deadly assault course, there is still the threat of treachery. Larger crocs will happily make a meal of raw recruits. No self-respecting hunter will pass up an easy kill. And once the bigger crocs have had their fill, only 1% of hatchlings survive their training and make the grade. Despite the low survival rate, Northern Australia's vast wetlands are not short of salties. Heavy hunting by man only ended in the 70s. It took out all the big, hungry adults. This allowed new generations of crocs to grow up without the threat of cannibalism. Scientists are amazed by the croc's comeback.
After the end of the hunting period, there were just hardly any left, a few thousand, and most of those were juveniles. Now we're back to like 75,000 or something. Most of them are big guys. And they recovered from 26 years of just intense hunting with no great strategy, no restocking, anything, just taking the pressure off. So we know we've got an animal. If the worst case scenario comes and they really got knocked down, they can still recover.
Recruits that survive to adulthood must go on to master a range of terrains. For any army, transport is a crucial factor. Crocs can march for miles to find new hunting territories if their home creek dries up. This advanced formula movement is unique to crocs. It's not the walk of a mammal, or the slither of a reptile. Body armor is the key. The croc's rugged exterior isn't just a flak jacket, it has an important structural role.
When we started to dissect this animal, we found that removing this segment of skin was really difficult because all the muscles running down the back are attached directly to the underside of the armour. And you can see that better from underneath on this segment. Each segment of muscle runs in a different direction. And what this means is that when they contract, they brace the armour against the backbone.
The armor doesn't just anchor the muscles in place, it also confines them, keeping the long bodies stiff and off the ground.
If muscles bulge, they expand, but in the case of crocodilians, they are contained in a sort of tube, which is formed by armor and the backbone. And this system can be compared to a hose running alongside the body, which is filled with water. And like a hose which is turned on, the whole body is stiffened by the inner pressure of the bulging muscles.
Crocodiles' long bodies are raised off the ground by hydraulic pressure. With their body in this position, they can't just walk, they can charge. But this galloping run isn't an attack. Alarmed, crocs always take cover in the water, as fast as their legs will carry them. It's their ultimate comfort zone. Crocs don't just live in fresh water. They've adapted to survive at sea. Special glands in the tongue shed excess salt, keeping body fluids in balance. They cruise the coastlines in search of new rivers to invade. Saltwater crocs go even further. They've been found in the open sea. An armored invasion force heading to remote oceanic islands. But what are the physical qualities that give crocs command of the water? Crocodiles' mastery of the water has long been a mystery. Now, medical science is shedding light on the subject. This is heart bypass surgery, a high-risk operation for a human. For a swimming alligator, a heart bypass is a simple biological function, letting it send blood where it's most needed. Crocs have the world's most advanced hearts. Scientific research is just beginning to uncover their secrets. This alligator's heart is split down the middle, like a human heart. One side pumps blood to the lungs to pick up fresh oxygen. The other side sends the oxygenated blood around the body. When the gator dives and can't refill its lungs, it alters its blood flow to compensate. By adjusting a unique set of valves, the heart diverts blood away from the lungs, sending it straight to the brain and other vital organs. The blood has an amazing capacity to release oxygen, much better than other diving animals. Submerged, the gator can phase out the blood supply to its muscles and reduce its heart rate to 1 or 2 beats a minute. In this standby mode, it can lurk here for a couple of hours, undetected. Seconds after it draws breath, all systems are back online and the gator is ready for action. It's a powerful swimmer. The muscular tail provides forward thrust. The legs are streamlined to the body, and buoyancy and posture are controlled by the amount of air in the lungs. The gator is primed to attack. But what are the weapons in its arsenal? Planning and preparation are all very well. But when it comes to the crunch, you need the right weapons for the job. In a life that can span 100 years, a croc will wear through several thousand teeth. With 60 plus to a mouth, it can nail just about anything. These massive jaws bite down with a force of several tons. But opening them again is a different story. They can be held shut with a sturdy rubber band.
You can't really fight a battle unless you've got the right tools to do the job. And these evolve through time, and the types of weapon systems vary enormously.
The alligator is a crushing machine. Its broad, rounded snout, ideal for cracking turtles or crabs. But most crocodiles have narrower, pointed jaws, suited to a more varied diet, from tiny prawns to hefty wildebeest. These are gharials from India, with their trademark bulbous noses. A male can grow to nearly 20 feet, but he's harmless to humans. Rapier jaws set with needle-sharp teeth make lethal weapons for catching slippery fish. A gharial eats little else. But even with the right weapons, there are times when targets are thin on the ground. All crocs, big or small, have to find a way to survive the lean times. They say an army marches on its stomach, but crocs don't always play by the rules.
Resources in the field, the military would call logistics, and the ability to sustain yourself with the logistics are absolutely vital to winning a campaign.
Just like an army, animals' lives are governed by logistical considerations. Mammals and birds warm their bodies from the inside by burning fuel. This allows them to conquer colder climates. Yet they have to spend a great deal of time keeping the furnaces stoked. Crocs approach the problem in a different way. They use heat from the sun to maintain their body temperature. When a croc basks, it's making the most of every ray that hits its armor. A heat-sensitive camera reveals a series of bumps glowing far warmer than the rest of the body. These peaks, laced with tiny blood vessels, are acting as solar panels. Heat is absorbed through the skin and downloaded into the bloodstream. Most crocodilians have an optimum basking temperature of about 32 degrees centigrade. Any hotter, they decamp to shade or water. By moving between cool and warm conditions, crocs can control their body temperature to within a few degrees, the range at which they function best. Their approach to hunting keeps energy needs down as well.
You see all these lions and tigers and all this stuff, and they run things down. These things don't do that. They're not running around in circles chasing stuff. Everything's just low energy. They don't burn energy until they need it, and they just power it on. And that's why it's often hard, you know, when animals or people get grabbed to get away.
Pound for pound, a bird must eat 50 times more food than a croc to stay alive. So while a croc is basking in the sun, a bird is trapped in the endless search for food. Large crocs can survive on their fat store for an entire year, playing a waiting game that would kill the rest of us.
You don't know how long the battle is going to be, so you don't know how many supplies you'll need to enable you to last the battle. Sometimes an enemy is defeated because they run out of supplies. They're not actually defeated in battle at all. So if you can build up your resources, you can accumulate enough food, never mind enough ammunition, and certainly water would be crucial as well, then the chances are that you're going to win the battle.
Crocs' physical assets as predators are obvious, but there's more to a successful attack than brute force. You have to find your prey. Graham Webb believes that Croc's success is due in part to their choice of attack location.
Crocs, as far as we know, don't do much feeding underwater. Well, they're not the sort of animals that go diving down the bottom, swimming around, plucking up daisies from the rocks. They're basically a water's edge predator. They're designed to feed right on the water's edge, especially these guys. So they're not chasing fish, grabbing things. They're cornering things.
Crocs have a sophisticated array of guidance systems to help them detect and locate potential targets. Clever design means all the sensory systems on the head are in one plane. In the water, a vanishing act leaves only the very top of the head above the surface. Eyes that see by night as well as day can detect every move. Hidden ears are listening in, while barely exposed nostrils complete the surveillance above deck. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the surface, this motionless predator is alert to movement, sensing vibrations in the water through its skin. When it's time to dive, the hatches close.
It can come up in front of a predator and it looks like a turtle has just come up or some innocuous little thing. They don't know that underneath the water there's half a ton of teeth and all this stuff. And they've never lived to tell the story a lot of the time.
But not all the Croc's software is tuned to enemy frequencies. Sometimes coded messages from allies are intercepted.
Communication between friendly forces is absolutely vital on the battlefield. So you can recognize your enemies and tell them apart from your friends. So it may be some kind of secret communication code that the enemy can't understand or can't even listen to.
For most of the year, a croc is a highly tuned killing machine. But there's always time for a bit of R&R, when sensory systems are redeployed. And this is when alligator biologist Dr. Kent Fleet chooses to enter alligator territory, Florida's dense swampland.
Most reptiles don't produce much sound. Obviously, we all know snakes hiss, but crocodilians have the most complex vocal behaviors of any reptile group. And alligators are really about the most vocal of all the crocodilians. Even from within the egg, young animals will chirp, but as adults, these animals are really vocal.
Finding a mate in the low visibility of a swamp means that only sound will do. And some of the systems used are more sophisticated than scientists ever imagined.
As we began to study the behavior of these animals in more detail, we saw this visual display immediately before the audible bellow, which we refer to as a water dance. The water is driven up off the back of the animal. And we know now that that is produced by very intense, low-frequency sounds from deep within the body of the animal, sounds that are below human levels of hearing. They seem to be using a wide repertoire of sounds. There's a complexity of vocal communication that we still don't understand.
Back on the front line, all senses are focused on the battle for survival and on locating a target.
Opponents have a habit of giving themselves away. It may be through sight, it may be through sound, or it may be through something they have no control over it. So your army of today wants to be as sophisticated as possible with a variety of ways of detecting an enemy other than sight and sound.
A river in northern Australia. The trees and bushes along its banks are home to a noisy colony of fruit bats. It's the wet season and the water is high. The smell from the colony travels 1/4 of a mile downwind. With its sensory array deployed, a saltwater croc soon detects the chemical traces of this potential target. Guidance systems lock on. Under cover of water, the croc can approach unseen. Like a U-boat in enemy water, it surfaces without a ripple. And while the bats chatter, the croc can pick off its target. Part submarine, part jump jet, a powerful tail of solid muscle can launch it 6 feet in the air. Mission accomplished. Even with the best weapons and technology, a successful attack still requires planning.
If you sit back and observe your enemy, you can learn an awful lot about their habits, and that's going to indicate whether you can attack them in an efficient way. So if you sit back and watch the way they patrol, the way they walk, their eating habits, you can then take a view on when to ambush them at the most appropriate time.
The Luangwa River, Zambia. The past 20-odd million years have brought an ever-changing menu to the resident crocodiles. Each new target presents different challenges to the attacker, so the secret of success is to watch, wait, and learn. It's late October, the dry season. The water is low. Thirsty animals are forced to wade closer and closer to the enemy in order to drink. The sticky mud makes the maneuver a logistical nightmare. From point-blank range, the croc strikes at 20 miles an hour and misses by a hair's breadth. But it'll learn from its mistake, and as the dry season wears on, the antelope are going to be drawn back to the precious water again and again. Other predators understand the danger only too well. This lioness calls her cubs back from hostile territory. Hippos are large enough to fend off a croc attack, so long as they're on their guard. But every predator knows that the enemy eventually lets its guard down. It's just a matter of waiting. An old hippo lies dying in the shallows. His struggles have attracted the interest of two enemies: lions on land and crocs in the water. But even a dying hippo has a lethal bite. It's wiser to wait. But the crocs are waiting too, for night to fall.
The ability for any forces to fight at night is going to give them an advantage, particularly if the other side doesn't have that ability to fight. Your enemy is blinded and they won't know where you are, and before you know what's happened, you'll be all over them.
The night breeze wafts a stench of death and the promise of a feast. It's almost the end for the old hippo, and hungry animals gather on the banks. But the water is strictly off limits. While most reptiles are active only by day, crocodiles don't stop when the sun goes down. Their pupils are adapted to trap any available light, and their eyes are lined with a highly reflective surface, so not a single photon of light is wasted. With the field of battle under the croc's command, the massed attack on the hippo begins. Crocs can't chew, so they roll to tear mouthfuls of flesh from the hippo's flanks. A crocodile eats in surprisingly small chunks. Its stomach is not much bigger than a human head. The morning after the attack, and the crocodiles have one thing on their mind. Their bellies are full, and to make use of these new resources, they must raise their metabolic rate. They'll spend the next few hours basking in the sun. The enemy has been attacked and devoured, but the battle isn't over yet. The food in the stomach is now subjected to an intense chemical attack. In the forests of Australia's northern wetlands, scientists are studying this process, fishing for the elusive freshwater croc. Even a small freshwater croc is a force to be reckoned with. Narrow jaws and sharp teeth may be the classic weapons of the fish eater, but their bite is still capable of removing fingers. Only a tenth of the weight of a salty, it still has to be handled with caution. Because crocs can't really chew their food, it reaches the stomach in large chunks. It's broken down by chemical attack. Their digestive juices contain concentrated hydrochloric acid. Under those conditions, you're lucky to find any leftovers.
Which is pretty typical of what you'd expect.
Scientists believe that these pebbles are swallowed deliberately. Kept in the stomach, they make efficient do-it-yourself grinders. All the evidence points to one conclusion. Crocs are an attack force of considerable sophistication, and 3,000 people every year become the focus of this deadly expertise. A croc attack is more than just a random burst of carnivorous bloodlust. It is a precise, considered, tactically deployed explosion of power and skill, honed over millions of years. So why do humans become the focus of all the skill, ingenuity, and raw intensity of a croc attack? The answer is simple. To crocs, we are a legitimate target. We're prey.
Human attacks are usually like classic feeding attacks are an animal that's hunting, not just sitting there and waiting. With a human and a croc, it's usually something visual or something in the water splashing, the sounds carry through the water. One of the first steps of the croc will be, when they hear something like that, is to orient at it. They'll just turn their head like this, just turn it around and face it at where that person is, usually on the edge or something. They might be 50, 100 metres away. The croc itself will dive and swim over underwater and come up, bang, right in front, probably a metre out from where that person is. I've had it happen to me. I tell you, it's quite frightening, you know, because all you see is this great yellow mouth with all these teeth. A big thing like this opens its mouth like this and it's coming at you, you know, and you're sitting up here facing it. Yeah, it's a pretty sobering experience, you know.
Crocodiles have secured a special place in human imagination. We've shared the planet with them throughout our history. In that time, we've become fascinated and tantalized by creatures that have the guile and strength to kill us. Almost 4,000 years ago, the ancient Egyptians worshipped the Nile crocodile as a god called Sobek. Temples were dedicated to him, and crocodiles kept in sacred pools were decorated with gold and jewels. Today, 4,000 years later, the worship of the crocodile continues. We pay to see crocs display the formidable array of skills, weapons, and strategies that make them such effective killing machines. This is an animal that demands our respect, and it's not going to ask twice. A croc attack combines an arsenal of strategies and systems worthy of any modern fighting force. Who knows where we'd be without crocs?
What a boring bloody existence it is in the world today generally. You know, all you see is all this bad news on television. This is exciting stuff. There's still some adventure left in us somewhere.
Next tonight, cover-ups and scandal and a murder in the military. John Travolta is the army investigator going undercover to find out who killed the general's daughter. That's our movie next.